Welcome back to the Banter Salon here in Derry at the City of Culture. We're here for Other Voices, and it's great to see you all here. This is the third session today, and I'm very pleased to welcome a man who's been on the Banter Salon hit list since day one. We've been on the hit list since day one. John Naughton from The Observer and from the Open University. Please give him a warm round of applause. John, like, you're a man with many hats. I know you primarily as the person who writes in The Observer every Sunday, whose column is always to the point, and there's always food for thought in it. Really is. It's one of the few technology columns that's not necessarily about, I suppose, kind of how to put it, tapping the technology industry on the back. You know, you do call the shots like you call it, but you also are a professor at the Open University, am I right?
I'm an emeritus professor.
Emeritus professor at Open University. So when did you start writing your column for The Observer?
In 1987.
Okay, that 1987 was
before you were born.
No, hey, I was still in school. 1987. That was before email. That was before.
No.
Okay. Before email was, I suppose, widely accepted, widely known.
No, long after. Well, yes, before it was widely known. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was using email in a laboratory in 1972.
Right. So, did you when you started using email back then in an academic setting, did you have any inkling yourself that it was going to this was a precursor to a kind of a great technology leap forward to a world of Facebooks, a world of Twitter, a world of like technological innovation such as we have today?
I didn't think, of course, about things like Facebook, but it was absolutely clear to those of us who were involved in it that this was going to radically transform. It certainly would radically transform the way we communicate, and that was obvious in the beginning. It's just that nobody knew about it because it was. I mean, the internet we use today started essentially in a project in the Defense Department in the Pentagon in 1966. The internet that we use, though, was switched on in 1983. But for most of the 1980s, nobody knew about it because in order to access it, you had to be in a research lab. In general, so it was a very small sort of priesthood of people who had access to it. But for the 1980s, it existed. It was clear from that period onwards that it was a major change, and it only became a mainstream phenomenon after Tim Berners-Lee invented the web, and it went really mainstream with the first browser in '93. So now, one of the things about that is that. I think that our way of thinking about this stuff is fantastically ahistorical. What I mean is that our communications environment is in the process of revolutionary overthrow or change, and the problems with revolutions is that first of all it's very hard to know where they finish, and for most of the commentary that we have about this stuff, you'd think that it was already over. I've got a thought experiment which I use with students to communicate that, because it just so happens that we've lived through such a revolution once before, and it was triggered by a guy called Johannes Gutenberg, and we can date when it started. It started in 1455 when we know the first Gutenberg Bibles were printed. Now, here's my thought experiment. So 1455 is when we have the first Bibles. Imagine that you're now that is 1473, and you're a Maury pollster, you're an opinion pollster in the German city of Mainz, where Gutenberg worked, and you're standing on the bridge over the Rhine, and you've got a clip slate, and you're stopping people, and you're saying, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if I ask you a question?" And here's question 4. Question 4 is, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is definitely yes and 5 is definitely no, do you think that the invention of printing by movable type will, A, undermine the authority of the Catholic Church, B, trigger and fuel the Protestant Reformation, C, enable the rise of modern science, D, create entirely new categories, social categories and professions and so on, and E, change even our conceptions of childhood? On a scale of 1 to 5, yes or no? Now, you only have to ask that question to realize it was daft, because printing did all of those things and much more in 400 years. But nobody in Mainz in 1473 had the faintest idea. Okay, why 1473? Because we're about the same distance into the web. Okay, right. So from my point of view, most of our discussion about this stuff ignores that fact. Nobody knows anything really, and nobody has the faintest idea where this stuff is going to end or what kinds of profound changes it's going to have. The only thing we know for sure is that it looks like as if it's like print, And if it's like print, then those changes are going to be so fundamental, most people can't imagine them.
Yeah. One of the biggest changes, I suppose, that the internet has brought about and the technology has brought about in the back of that is to do with kind of, I suppose, identity. And it's to do with, like, you write quite a lot about the likes of Facebook, Google, Twitter, those social media phenomenons and how they're changing things, how they're morphing things.
Yeah.
When you go back to, say like, I mean, the early days of print, is there can you see a similar correlation between what happened there in terms of people's identity, in terms of finding out about new ideas, in terms of, like, I suppose, changing what they thought of? Because I mean, before print came in, if you were in your local area, you found out, like, orally what was going on. It was passed from person to person. Print allowed people to kind of, like, I suppose, distribute this information. With kind of like technology and internet, you're suddenly kind of I suppose the distribution field for what you're talking about is so much wider. Like, has the change in people's identity is it similar to what happened when print came back in those days?
I don't know what happened to identity in relation to print, but I think it's fairly clear what's happening to identity in the period we're living through now, because until the rise of, say, social networking in general, your offline identity, your real identity, the identity you have as a living, breathing human being, overshadowed any other kind of identities you might have. And what I think might be happening is that we're moving to a period where, first of all, everybody will have an online identity, whether they like it or not. And secondly, those offline identities will come to overshadow their real identities. And if that, in fact, is what's going to happen, then that has really serious implications. For all kinds of reasons, but it has really serious implications. And that's what may be happening.
Do you, like, I mean, when you say kind of serious implications, are you talking about, like, the fact that a lot of people don't realise that all their information they have online can be connected back to them? Or are you talking about the fact that people may have to become used to? I suppose I'm kind of thinking of kind of going back to kind of that book, The Shallows, and how the internet technology is changing people's brains. That maybe younger people can actually adopt a different kind of, like, persona in terms of having online and offline persona, whereas, like, older people, it's just a harder kind of way around it, you know?
I think there's an age difference, but that's not the key thing. The key thing about an online identity is that the system never forgets. You know, we're used to our offline identities as being, well, we were young once, and most of the people we know may have forgotten what we were like when we were young and so on. And now we're middle-aged and we're different, and that's okay. But if your identity is largely determined by your online record, by your online identity, then everything you've ever done is going to be unerasable. It's going to be available. The system never forgets. Somebody used a phrase to express that, which is that there are never going to be any heroes anymore because we will know too much about everybody. You know your failures, you know your successes, you know the stupid things you did, the clever things you did, and they'll all be somewhere unerasable. Yeah, and that's different. It's never been like that before.
Yeah, I mean that's
and also it also means that if online identities become the things that define you, then you're vulnerable to identity theft in a really serious way, and that might be a really tough problem to crack. And we're heading in that direction anyway. I mean, I've been a customer of Lloyds Bank since 1985. Right? I go to a small branch in Cambridge, and everybody in that branch knows me. They say, hello, Professor Naughton, how are you doing, and all the rest of it. One day, I'm buying a car. I have to move a large quantity of cash from one account. I have to get some cash, a large quantity of cash. So I go to the bank, and I'm greeted by name by the cashier. And then I say what I want to do. And the cashier says, oh, have you got some form of identity? And I say, for Christ's sake, I've been coming here since 1985. And she says, oh, no, well, I'm sorry, but we can't do this without some proof of identity. Yeah. Now, that's a trivial case in the current offline-dominated world. But if you get to the point where every transaction you have to do has to be done online in relation to an online identity, then if that identity gets compromised in some way, or if you can't establish that identity belongs to you, you may find yourself in really queer street. Yeah. And that's where we're heading, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're talking there about, you know, you kind of identified identity theft, and you identified the fact that you couldn't erase your past. You know, I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to go back to what you gave the example of, kind of the gap between print it being established, and your student stopping people on the bridge and asking those questions. You know, and I'm kind of thinking, like, many people here would probably look upon issues like identity theft and the unerasable past as kind of, a little bit kind of like not that important, but in the context of history, it's vital.
I think they're wrong. I think we're sleepwalking into a nightmare. That's basically what I think.
Do you think we're given too much? We as a society have given too much, I suppose, leeway, power, and I suppose information and details and data to the likes of Facebook and Google? Do we see them as, in many ways, not as these kind of large, nebulous, kind of like almost like we buy into the hype, like we buy into the fact that Google is not evil. We buy into the fact that Facebook is just a way of connecting us with all our friends. It allows us to show pictures of our babies to people living 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles away.
I think that, well, let's take Google first. Let's take, Google has its motto, famous motto, don't be evil, okay, which is very laudable, and they're very nice people. I know quite a few of them, and they are decent human beings and so on and so forth. But I find the notion of a corporation having as a motto, don't be evil, kind of vaguely weird. We have 2 cats at home, okay, they're beautiful cats, and every day I lecture them on the need to be kind to small birds, and small rodents, and guess what? They pay no attention to it. Right? Well, why not? Why not? It's because cats do what cats do, and corporations do what corporations do. They maximize value for their shareholders. They, most of the time, obey the law, and that's it. So any kind of notion of a corporation saying we're not going to be evil is kind of vaguely risible. Yeah. Okay. Now, in the case of Facebook, say, or a social networking site, what you have is the astonishing spectacle of 1 billion human beings being completely gullible and naive, because essentially what they're doing is they're doing a lot of work for free, and they're providing it to Facebook, which then is exploiting their work, and they're not getting paid for it. They're basically sharecroppers in a new electronic world. They don't get anything from what they do. They provide massive amounts of wealth for the shareholders and people who own this company. And in return, what happens, what they're doing is they're allowing their privacy to be exploited. And the only gain they get is the satisfaction they get from using the service. The motto is, it's a perfectly obvious thing, which is that if a service, an online service is free, then you are the product. And that's a famous cliche, and it's true. And what's astonishing to me is the naivete of people in relation to identity. For example, can I ask a question of the audience?
Sure, of course.
How many people here are on Facebook? Right, thank you. How many of you have your real birthday on your Facebook account? Right. Folks, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Because you know when you talk to a bank or an insurance company or your car insurance, they say, what's your birthday, date of birth? You're already giving identity thieves a head start. You're off your heads. But we're doing stuff like that all the time. And for some reason, it's really bizarre. I can't understand why people don't see this, but they don't.
Do you think part of the reason people don't see that is because technology has become such an everyday part of our lives that, like, it's become, first thing in the morning? How many people here first thing in the morning check their email? Like before you get out of bed, check your email. Check your exactly. Check your Twitter. It's just become part of our everyday lives that we've stopped thinking about, like, those barriers. That's what strikes me. I mean, I'm not on Facebook because I think it's ridiculous. I've no interest in being, as you put it very, very, very nicely there, being a sharecropper for Mark Zuckerberg's billions. I've no interest in that. But I'm on Twitter because I see certain value in terms of Twitter, in terms of getting information, in terms of getting news. But I'm also kind of aware that I don't know what part of the machine I am in terms of Twitter.
Yeah, well, Twitter's never going to forget everything you've put on it. That's for one. But I think I give up.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move away. That's bringing that one nicely to a close. Let's move away, I suppose, from kind of like those kind of people, likes of Facebook, Twitter, and that, and kind of like how you started writing for the Observer back in the late 1980s, and do you think media has adopted technology in a good way? Or do you think media has kind of lost a run of itself when it came to technology?
It depends on what media you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. The print
you've had a
rating.
really good. The earlier session with Casper was really good in the sense of what happened to the music business. Okay, and the music business didn't seem to see what this technology would do, and we've seen the consequences of that. The newspaper industry did not see the implications. And it's in all kinds of interesting ways. For example, because I've been in the newspaper business a long time. I've written a weekly column every week since 1982. Okay, so I know the print business really well, and I'm also an engineer, so I've been in the network business as well. So I've a foot in both graves, as it were. Okay, and in the case of the newspaper business, for example, when the net first appeared, journalists basically thought this is about news. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to think about what we do with news on the net. And what they did is they decided, well, we put news up and we'll give it away for free. Okay. What they didn't appreciate was what the internet really does, which is that it dissolves value chains. And a newspaper is a value chain. It takes a very expensive and loss-making activity called journalism, and it puts it together with a very profitable business called advertising, classified advertising in particular, and which makes a lot of money. And the value chain means that the profitable bit supports the unprofitable bit. Okay, that's the value chain. Well, what the net does is it dissolves value chains. And in the case of the newspaper business, what it did is it took the profitable bit, because classified advertising works much better online because you can search than it does. And it simply dissolved the value chain and pulled away the economics of newspapers. That's what nobody saw that happening. Some people did, but the industry didn't see it in time. And everywhere you look, you see industries which say, well, yes, we can see how the net screwed those guys. Because those guys being, the music industry or the travel agents business or whatever, we can see. But actually, we're special, and it won't happen to us. And the latest group of poor saps in this area are, of course, book publishers. Yeah. Because they've said, well, it used to happen to newspapers and it used to happen to all those guys, it won't happen to us. Well, guess what? The biggest publisher in the world in 5 years' time will be Amazon, probably. Okay. And of course, the next one along the line are universities.
Yeah, I mean that's quite interesting.
Yeah,
because it is. Yeah. It's something I've noticed from going to kind of like conferences and especially web conferences. They're suddenly bringing people like, I'm trying to remember the name. Coursera are one of them. Yeah. Stanford University are putting loads of their courses online as well. Yeah. And it seems to be like it's the current hip thing to do. And I'm kind of going, this is great. I go onto YouTube and I look at a lecture from Stanford University. It's fabulous. I'll never get to Stanford University in a million years, but I can actually kind of like see this lecture. And then I kind of say to myself, who's paying the dude who's giving the lecture? Where's that? Where's that money coming from? Like, do they not realize that giving away all their courses like this, course content for free, is in the long term going to decimate them? I mean, from your point of view as well. I mean, you like the Open University, I suppose, was a kind of a precursor in some ways for this, disseminating courses in that kind of way.
Sure. Well, in the case of Stanford and Harvard and MIT, and some of the other ones that are doing this at the moment, well, they're doing it because they can afford to. Secondly, and also it doesn't threaten them. Because making really high quality teaching available from some of the best people in the world, making it available free online, doesn't actually stop people wanting to come to Harvard or to Stanford. That's not going to worry them at all. What it does, but it is a disruptive technology because the higher education business is huge, and for most of it, it's ludicrously expensive, and it's also very poor quality. So the real threat of these developments is not to the Harvards and Cambridges and MITs of this world. It is to middle-rank universities in Britain and all over the world, which are actually providing not very good teaching. They're not providing much in the way of pastoral care, and they're just packing in students and thinking that they can go on doing this forever. And actually, it's not going to work. In the long run, it's not going to work. So there is going to be, I think, a serious disruption of the higher education business. And it's been obvious for a long time that it was due. In 1995, a professor at Columbia called Eli Noam wrote a wonderful paper published in Science. And the title was Electronics and the Dim Future of the University. And he said, basically, when the Library of Congress can be on your laptop, and where the stuff that he envisaged, which is what we're seeing now, really high-quality teaching by the world's best people, if that's also available on your laptop, Well, what do universities provide? Okay, and the answer is, in some cases they provide special stuff. In most cases, actually, they don't provide very much that's special anymore. And then the question is, well, what then?
But like, surely, then what you're seeing there is you're seeing technology disrupting an industry which has gone lazy, John. I mean, you're talking there about like a lot of universities and colleges who you said it yourself, like are not providing the goods in the way they should be providing. So is this not a case like of kind of like technology culling a cull being caused by technology?
Most industries are lazy. In the sense, for example, the music business. Take the music business. It was digital from 1982. Well, probably from 1980, but in 1982 the first CD players arrived, okay? So from then on, every single piece of music was a bit stream, ones and zeros, okay? And the industry's problem was, how do we get our bits from the recording studio to the home player at home, okay? And the way they invented was that we'll make plastic discs and we'll put the ones and zeros on it, and then we'll put the plastic discs in we put labels on them, we put them into boxes which break. We'll then put the boxes into crates, and we'll put those into trucks, and they'll take them all over the place. And then when they get to the shop, they'll be taken out of the crates. The discs will be taken out of the boxes will be put on display, and the customer will come in and he'll see the box, and then he or she will buy the disc, and they'll take it home and they put it into their player, and the player will see the ones and zeros on the disc and convert it back into noise. Okay, so the disc was the industry's way of shipping bits from one place to another. Okay, that's 1982. 1983, the internet switched on. Okay, the internet's a global machine for transferring bits from one place to another at no cost. Yeah. And here you have an industry which is spending this colossal amount of money shipping bits by making plastic, okay? And global machines invented for doing the same thing for nothing. And the industry says, nothing to do with us, basically. Second thing is, because the economics of the plastic meant that singles made no sense economically, only albums did. So the industry just basically said, if you want music, you get it as CDs, you get it as albums. Yeah. Actually, the customers rather like tracks. And in the end, the internet delivered tracks. And the industry... Now, that's an example of a lazy industry. And most of the industries that are due for disruption or are being disrupted are ones which were lazy, in the sense they had a business model which worked for a long time, which yielded good returns for no money, high margins, and all the rest of it. Remember Kodak?
Kodak. What's Kodak?
Kodak. Yeah. The margin that Kodak had a stranglehold on the film business. Their margins were 60-70%. They invent the digital camera. And their engineers come to their kind of senior executives and say, we have this stuff, and the rest of it. And the guys say, well, what kind of margins on it? And they say, well, it's electronics. The margins will always be thin. And they say, come on, forget it. Same story. This is going on all the time.
Okay, I realise we've talked a lot of stuff. We started off with identity. We've moved through to the kind of like the Facebook pages. We've kind of realised everyone here is potentially going to have their bank accounts ripped off tomorrow by all of us here. We'll look at your email address and kind of go, we can get your Facebook accounts. We've went through like lazy industries. Like, you know, as someone who's been kind of covering this ground for a long time, are you an optimist about what technology can do and what technology can do in the future? And this is the final question. I mean, you know, as someone who reads your columns, I kind of find that it's just this no nonsense, straight up approach, and it's something that you don't get anywhere else. But I often try to say to myself, is John Naughton an optimist?
He's an optimist in his DNA. Professionally, he's worried. The most profound thing that anybody's ever said about this was Neil Postman, who was a great cultural critic in the United States and sadly long dead. But he once said that our futures are bounded by the nightmares of two English writers. The first is George Orwell, and the second is Aldous Huxley. Orwell believed we would be destroyed by what we fear, intensive, pervasive, non-stop surveillance. And Aldous Huxley believed we'd be destroyed by the things that delight us. Right? Okay, well, on the Orwellian front, we're doing just fine. Everything you do on the net, but everything you do on the net is logged. If you keep your stuff on a cloud service which is hosted in the United States, then the NSA is reading everything on that cloud drive. They can't do that at the moment for American citizens, but they can do it for non-American citizens. Everything you do leaves a trail, and can be done. So on the Orwellian front, we're doing just fine. Yeah. Okay. Now, how are we doing on the Huxley front? How many people here have iPhones? Right. Huxley's doing just fine. because you think you own your iPhone, yeah? I've got an iPhone. I don't think I own it, but I do have it. Right. Well, your iPhone is not your iPhone at all, because an invisible thread stretches from you to one infinity loop, Cupertino in California, where Apple's headquarters are. And nothing goes onto that device that Apple hasn't approved, unless you've jailbroken it. But now the point I'm trying to get at is that we have also and people love their iPhones. They're wonderful. They're delightful. Huxley would have recognized it immediately. It's the thing is that we are also running the risk of being controlled by the things that we love. And that's the perspective. And my problem is that I shift from day to day between where I think we're winding up. But I'm not universally optimistic about this stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the last half an hour. John Naughton.